$2 a million BTU, and the implied volatility is around 30%. And the swing option could grant an option holder can have up to 10,000 million BTU of natural gas each week. That's, you can take maximum. And at the price of, the pre-agreed price of $2 million BTU. The total volume purchased is going to be given like between 10,000 and 30,000. So here, given month, he has to take, or he has to pay for a minimum of 10,000. He can go to maximum 30,000. But for any given time, if he has to exercise the option, he doesn't have to take all the 10,000. He can use 0 or all the way up to 10,000. For a given month, he has to take 10,000 or he has to pay for the 10,000. So what are the quantitative dilemmas? In a given group, for example, let's assume Enron is, somebody is coming and say, hey, you want to use the swing option, you want to develop a pricing for this, and what are the dilemmas there involved? Do they want to use a swing option, or they want to use some other like stochastic process? A lot of other things are involved in this. And again, valuation of a swing option, and the boundaries, and what are the pricing methodology? What are the price they are going to derive upon? What is the agreed price? Those are the risks involved in that. So, using the binomial forest, actually this terminology was coined again by the Enron, binomial forest. Using the binomial tree, because we all know using the pricing structure, like using the U, D, and the probability, we can calculate the pricing at the different nodes. So this simply to determine the pricing at the various volume levels and the different time periods. And let's assume the input parameters, the set price is $2, and the strike price is $2, and the discount rate is 5%. Volatility, we are assuming 30%. Actually, in the real life scenario, it is not true. The swing is very high, 50, 60, even 70. The implied volatility is very high, but we are assuming for 30%, but that's not really true. But these days, it's extremely high volatility in real life. Time period is 112 because we are using only 1 month. Number of steps is 4, because assuming that 4 weeks, because sometimes it's going to be 5 weeks, but here we are assuming 4 weeks. And minimum volume V and the small v and maximum volume uppercase V. And the V minimum quantity is 10,000 and maximum is going to take 30,000. Yes.
What is this volatility of 30%? Is it annual?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't talked too much about it, but as you may have read in the chapter in the text, typically the volatility is done on an annualized basis, and typically looking at the front end pricing volatility, the spot price. And one other thing, well, we haven't talked about it, I don't think specifically, but it's probably covered in the text you read. On the gas trading, 10,000 MMBTUs is very common even in the over-the-counter market because that's the size of the contract on the NYMEX. So this is sort of a common structure. I mean, theoretically, someone could do transaction in an over-the-counter deal, could do any size to their specific exposure, but this is sort of the most common.
So if you calculate the option pricing, you get around 906 minimum quantity and maximum is around 890. So based on the demand and option pricing, and the supplier or the option holder is going to exercise or not exercise, but it gives a good feeling for that. See, anecdotal evidence from the market participants suggests that buyer of swing options often exercise suboptimally. So what does it mean actually? Even though it's for the seller, whoever is selling the option, they are going to hedge for that benefit. Whereas when they are buyer, it's always they are going to either use it or you got to pay extra penalty. So they always try to use the suboptimal, buyer. Because the demand is always unpredictable. It's going to change. And the financial implications, sellers swing options optimally hedge their positions, and buyers swing options suboptimally exercise their contracts. What are the issues involved? Some counterparties will execute their options out of need, as I told initially, because they have to take it, the demand is high, then they will take it even though they will not be, it's out of the money, but they will exercise the option.
Go back to the last slide,
Sure.
so I can explain that last point again, please.
financial implications seller of swing options who optimally hit their position. So that means, suppose I'm trying to sell the options to the side, whoever is buying. I'm trying to hedge to my benefit, right? Whereas in the case of the whoever is holding the options, they have to use it because their volatility, their demand is going to be very different. So whether they like it or not, sometimes because of the demand, they use it. It's not going to be for the profit. So it's most of the time it's going to be suboptimal. It's not going to be optimum level. That's what I meant.
And optimal, I guess, in the sense of economic. So someone's, a lot of the users, even the big users, and this has probably changed in terms of sophistication in the market over the last few years, but some users are simply exercising based on we need more gas today without any reference in terms of what the price is today versus what the sort of the economics would be and sort of reselling the gas even if they didn't need it. So I think that generally characterizes the user side of the market. And I think that's what you're...
Yeah, that's what I mean. So that's what happens. Like, the option holder is always going to be, it is not exactly optimal. Whereas whoever is giving the option, it's, their hedges are much better.
I've seen it from the dealer side, progress in sophistication. When I was with Dupuy Dreyfus, we traded our pharma these, which were embedded in physicals, where we had the right for interruption and so on, for a certain number of days. And early on, we did it. The traders were doing it intuitively. Today, the price is, the strike on it is $2, but we have the right to interrupt. Today, it's moved to $5.60. It's definitely in the money. And sort of a decision was made to exercise, because if you exercise, you're precluding future exercise typically in these deals because you have a given amount of volume. So that's, I don't think the approach, that's 6 years ago as opposed to currently. But I think the dealers, the trade houses are doing it on a more quantitative, probabilistic basis. That's probably not true with most of the users. They're simply exercising based on under demand or consumption basis.
So the opportunity there.
There's an opportunity, and swings have become very. I think you still have more slides to go through, so I don't want to jump ahead on too much. But in the natural gas market, swing options have become common fare, whereas 4 or 5 years ago they were truly exotic, guesstimation in terms of pricing and so on. Whereas now it's very common for any duration and structure.
One more thing, involved in the swing options also. Even though everything is clear, okay, we are going to have volume, we are going to use it. The price risk is called as gapping risk. One more thing, like a completely unknown, like gapping risk, like a politically, or the pipeline is suddenly disrupted. Boom, you don't know. But swing options is going to help in those situations also. Hedging will be better. In that case, you can argue, okay, he's going to make money. So. That's what here it said, this slide says, like some counterparties will execute the option out of the need as opposed to the economic profit. So that's why it's also called non-ruthless exercise. They want to just exercise it, they want to use it.
And some contracts will be written where that's the provision. I say, I'll cover your full requirements, so to speak. So it's not a matter, you're presumably precluded from playing an economic exercise basis, but it's strictly based on your demand at specific plants, that sort of thing. So, and so far, full requirements.
Okay, with this, what is the take-home information? It's a kind of a bit complex, but it's very doable. It's actually a swing option based on the Brownian motion. That's what the formula is derived. If somebody is a physicist, they can really appreciate what is the Brownian motion, like Brownian motion. So like look at, you got a liquid in the cup, The particles can move only up to the certain min and max. It's not going to move around. Whereas in the case of the air molecules can go free to move. Same way like pricing, it's a free to move. And that's based on the Brownian motion. The formula is actually basically derived. If somebody is really interested, I have the paper, so you can really look at this, get into the details. If you want to get into the quantitative side of this, it's extremely helpful actually. It's not that difficult actually, even though at the surface it may look to be difficult, it's fairly easy. It's not that very complicated mathematics involved, fairly easy. On most occasions, delivery is based on the demand side of the equation rather than the supply side, most of the time, it's true. In the real life situation, option is done every day. If you're going to be the quantity side of the business or on the option floor, you'll be doing the pricing every single day, not what we saw in the example, like, once a week you are going to exercise or, once a month. No, it's not the case. And definitely it's a good one to know, especially when you're going for the energy interviews and all, it's good to have, some kind of a knowledge about the swing options. Any questions?
Next Dave. Well, on the slides, again, we'll email you if you want copies of the slides, or if you don't want them, we'll just, still they'll be there, we're gonna send them to you. You can do with them what you want. To talk about some things that are alluded to in some of the chapters on options, as well as in the chapter 4 you'll be reading, which ties in with other applications of these derivative products, whether they're capsule collars or hybrids in the sense of combination of these. But in the sense, and this has been referred to in a number of ways, hybrids or structured products, and people mean a few different things by them, but generally, the idea of cross-market deals, and cross-markets, what are the markets? Well, they could be cross-markets between commodities, gas and electricity. I guess you could say a spark spread, a toll, so to speak, is again read about in the book, is cross-market in that sense between commodities. We're going to look at a couple of examples that are cross-market between interest rates and gas, and we'll talk about some other linked deals in the way of capital markets transactions linked to commodities. Why would someone do one of these hybrids? And this is sort of an open question since we haven't gone through the examples, but we've talked about before, what are the drivers in doing more complex? I mean, if you have a particular exposure, and the first step is identify and measure what your exposure position is. What's the objective of doing something that's more complicated in a hedge transaction? If you can hedge it with a fixed price deal, a swap, or a physical, or you can buy a cap if you're a user on an airline or something of that nature. What's the objective of doing any kind of more complex product? Hedge transaction. Again, presuming that you've decided that you are a hedger. Well, generally, it's to lower the cost, and we'll look at some examples in the way of matching more precisely the underlying exposure. Are there any others? I guess it depends on which side of the table you're on. If you're in Enron and you go into structuring products, one of the beauties, and this is the cynic's view, but I think it happens to be the truth, since I've been on that side of it. What's one of the beauties of doing a structured, complex, leveraged, hybrid, whatever, compared to selling someone a plain swap, a plain vanilla deal?
Difficult for others to understand.
Huh? You can what?
Difficult for others to understand.
It's difficult, that's right. You're the market scientist, and if you can sell the product that a lot of times, as I said before, and the users, and there are some very sophisticated users. Some users say, yeah, why don't you send me the blue book on it? We'd be delighted to look at that. And then they decompose it, figure out what the cost of and the margins are, what's the implicit volatility and the option that's embedded in some. And then they go to your competitors and say, we're looking for this sort of deal, but what we really want is a spread on the vols of this level and so on. But a lot of times users, they're not in the energy business, they're in the airplane business, or they're making chemicals or whatever it is. So again, another reason I think an